Well, this is awkward. Last video I mentioned how I wasn't able to get any review samples in due to various economic and tariff-related factors. And while that is still 99% the case, from last video to this one, I experienced a miracle. Asus actually got back to a several-month-old request to cover this laptop. So a huge thank you to Asus for sponsoring this video. You have an excellent taste in content creators. So way back at CES, I reached out during the show because the chip inside this laptop was pitched as a super affordable entry into Windows on ARM computing. $600. Yeah, that's the price range of laptops Qualcomm was hoping the chip would find its way into. And unfortunately, that's not the price of this machine. The ZenBook A14 is a $1,200 device sporting a $600 processor. And while you can't base a machine's entire value from its SoC, the chip choice itself does tell you a lot about the design philosophy behind the product. And more so than most laptops, I feel you really have to take a microscopic view on these Snapdragon machines because for better or for worse, they truly have changed the paradigm for Windows computing. But before we get down to tax brass, I just want to give my heartfelt thanks to everyone for 1,000 subscribers. I know this is kind of the YouTuber cliche where no one expected to make it this far, but I truly am humbled. I started this channel as an outlet for my creative musings about the industry, but in less than a year, I've already hit this crazy milestone. And that's all thanks to you. I'm, still learning the ropes surrounding content creation, but I aim to keep creating compelling content that you all enjoy. All I ask is that you kindly do the YouTube things. I have a lot of big ideas and dreams, but I am stifled somewhat by my size. But enough belly aching, let's get down to the laptop's rundown. The ZenBook A14 is built around Qualcomm's new Snapdragon X1-26-100 chip. What a mouthful. And this thing is important to understand because it's both the laptop's greatest strength and its most glaring limitation. So what are we working with here? Well, the X1-26-100 is the entry-level chip in Qualcomm's brand new Snapdragon X lineup, the same lineup that includes the beefier X Plus and flagship X Elite tiers. It's built on a 4nm process node, courtesy of TSMC, which immediately gives it a leg up in terms of power efficiency. This is a decent performing chip built with mobile DNA, and you feel it the moment you pick up the laptop or look at the battery stats. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This particular SoC features 8 performance cores, all based on Qualcomm's custom Orion architecture, the same foundational tech used across the entire Snapdragon X series. There are no efficiency cores here, which is unusual by today's standards, but it does mean every core is designed to clock up while also sipping power in the background. And clock up they do, to a max of 3.0 GHz, with 30 MB of shared system cache, keeping data flowing as smoothly as possible. That spec alone paints a picture of a chip built for balance, not brute force. But the rest of this machine, it tells a very different story. And one not of compromise because Asus still kitted it out with some high-end parts. You're getting a 32GB LPDDR5X RAM config, running up to 135GB a second of bandwidth, which is frankly overkill, some might say, for the chip's performance ceiling. Storage is solid too. A 1TB PCIe 4.0 SSD, which makes boot times, snappy, and your app launches very quick. There's no noticeable storage bottleneck here. GPU-wise, it's using the integrated Adreno GPU, clocked lower than its X Plus and Elite counterparts, and rated at roughly 1.7 Tflops performance. That's fine for video playback, light 3D work, and very casual gaming. But it's definitely not aimed at creators or gamers. The GPU was built for efficiency, not horsepower. And that emphasis on efficiency extends beyond the chip too. It even shows up in the port layout and connectivity features. The ZenBook A14 isn't loaded down with ports, but what's here is modern and practical. You've got 2 USB-C ports on the left side, both rated for USB 4.0 Gen 3, which means full support for fast charging, high-speed data, and external display output. One of those ports is also your charging port, so if you're plugging in peripherals and powering up at the same time, you're already down to 1 usable Type-C. Worth keeping that in mind. Next to that is an HDMI 2.1 output, which can handle 4K at 60 Hz. Great if you're hooking up an external monitor or TV. Then there's also the 3.5mm combo audio jack, which, yes, I'm still grateful for in 2025. Bluetooth is fine and all, but nothing beats the reliability of wired headphones in a pinch. Over on the right side, you get a lone USB-A port, USB 3.2 Gen 2, so thankfully it's not some legacy 2.0 junk. It's there for your dongle, mouse, flash drive, or any other random gadget that hasn't made the jump to Type-C yet. Wireless performance is solid too. The A14 supports Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3, and I had no problems with drop signals, even on crowded networks, and Bluetooth pairing was quick and reliable. This thing stays connected without any drama or fuss. But, and there's always a but, if you're someone who needs an SD card reader, multiple USB-A ports, or Ethernet, well, yeah, you're gonna need a dongle. The minimalist port selection makes sense for an ultralight machine, but it does mean some compromises on versatility. Still, for a device built around on-the-go productivity and efficiency, Asus struck a reasonable balance here. You've got just enough I/O to keep things flexible, and the fact that they went with full-speed USB 4.0 and HDMI 2.1 shows they weren't cutting corners. Then last and arguably least is the NPU. Qualcomm packed in the full-fat hexagon silicon, capable of 45 TOPS or trillions of operations per second. That puts it in the same AI performance class as the higher-end Snapdragon X chips, and far ahead Intel's Core Ultra 5 and 7 chips in terms of AI processing per watt. It's why Microsoft greenlit this chip as part of their Copilot Plus PC initiative, as contentious of an initiative that is. Though all in all, hardware-wise, the chip is cut down, but not a letdown. There's a lot to work with here, seeing as the SoC is just a scaled-back version of the top-end silicon, not something super low-end that got rebadged. Think of AMD and their incessant recycling of old Zen 2 and 3 parts. That's not what Qualcomm did here, which deserves commendations, although this ignores the giant performance-related elephant in the room. But we'll get into that later. Right now, I want to talk about the design of this laptop because it truly is a headline-worthy set of choices being made here. Love it or not, the ZenBook A14 makes a statement the moment you pick it up. At just 2.16 pounds, this laptop is shockingly light, like borderline disbelief levels of light. If you've ever picked up a dummy laptop at a store and thought, there's no way this thing is real hardware, that's the exact feeling you'll get here. It honestly messes with your brain a bit. And the reason for that is something Asus calls ceruleum, a proprietary material that blends ceramic and aluminum. It's a ceramic-coated aluminum alloy, and it's meant to be the best of both worlds. Lightweight like aluminum, rugged like ceramic. In practice, it is impressively light. It's also fairly sturdy, but it also kind of tricks your senses. When you first touch the top lid, it doesn't feel like metal. It doesn't even really feel like ceramic. It's got this smooth, matte surface that almost gives off a soft touch plastic vibe, like a high-end Chromebook. But here's a surprise. Fingerprints, they don't stick as much. You don't have a ton of smudgy oil patches, no gross streaks from opening and closing the lid all day. Asus absolutely nailed the top texture. Though the bottom of the laptop, that's a different story. The underside still uses the same ceruleum, but the texture is slightly different. Just enough to pick up every fingerprint and palm smear if you're holding it one-handed from the bottom or just resting on a warm surface like your lap. It doesn't look gross, but if you're picky about aesthetics, you'll find yourself wiping it more than you'd like. Color-wise, Asus calls this finish Iceland Gray. It's subtle, professional, understated, but it's not boring. The slightly bluish gray tone shifts ever so slightly depending on lighting, a nice touch that elevates the premium feel without resorting to the usual silver and chrome combo we see way too often. Even though I kind of like that silver and chrome. The hinge design is clean and practical, no weird gimmicks. You can open the laptop one-handed without the chassis lifting up off the desk, which is always a mark of solid build quality. The screen has a matte black bezel, fairly thin on the sides, with just enough room at the top for the 1080p webcam and IR sensor. When closed, the laptop has a clean, symmetrical aesthetic. No gamer flair, no chrome accents, no brushed metal nonsense. It looks like a laptop that just wants to get stuff done. And in a way, that's one of the A14's biggest strengths. It's not trying to look expensive. It's trying to look purposeful. Even the logo on the lid is subdued. Just a simple Asus word mark. No glowing badges or etched lines. It disappears into the surface at certain angles, almost like the laptop's trying to keep a low profile. And I kind of dig that. Everything about the form factor screams mobility first, from the 0.53-inch thin profile to the minimal port selection. It's clearly designed for someone who's carrying this thing around all day and every day. But that's not all, because I also want to take a look at the inputs. Keyboard and trackpad especially, because even the lightest laptop is worthless if typing on it feels like garbage. And typing on the A14 is fine, totally fine. It's got 1.3 millimeters of key travel, which lands it somewhere between the ultra shallow butterfly keys of yesteryear and the deeper, chunkier travel you'd get on something like a ThinkPad. The keys have a bit of a squishy bottom out feel, not mushy, but they don't snap back with any real authority either. You won't be flying through emails with the same tactile joy you might get on a mechanical keyboard, but it's comfortable enough for long sessions. The layout itself is also clean. No weird key placements, no half-sized arrow keys or awkwardly squished function rows. Asus even managed to sneak in a proper set of media controls and shortcuts in the F row, which I always appreciate. Backlighting is here too, white LEDs, 3 brightness levels, and they get the job done. Nothing fancy, but totally usable in dark or low light setups. But one subtle gripe, the keycaps are a little slippery. Not glossy, just smooth. If you tend to hover type or have dry fingers, then you might find your fingers drifting more than usual. Nothing a quick adjustment period won't fix, but it's worth flagging. Now the trackpad, and this is one of the more pleasant surprises on the A14. It's big, like genuinely roomy for a 14-inch Ultrabook. It sits dead center under the spacebar, and the surface is smooth, responsive, and resistant to oil and grime. It's not made of glass, this isn't a MacBook, but it gets really close in feel, I'd say. Clicks have a nice tactile thunk to them, not too stiff, not too shallow, and although it's a mechanical click pad rather than a haptic one, Asus tuned it really well. You won't be fumbling for a clickable zone or feeling dead spots near the top. That said, I do wish Asus had gone all in on a haptic touchpad here, especially at this price point. A good haptic pad makes the entire surface uniformly clickable and typically improves palm rejection. Asus has used them in other ZenBook models before, so it's a bit of a bummer not to see it here. Still, as far as traditional trackpads go, this one's up there. Palm rejection is solid, multi-touch gestures are fluid, and there's no lag or jitter, it just works. And in a world where Windows laptops still sometimes bungle basic input, that is a win. So in short, the keyboard and trackpad combo isn't gonna blow your mind, but it also won't get in your way. And on a machine this portable, that's exactly what you want. Now let's get into the screen, because the display on the ZenBook A14 is honestly one of the better parts of this whole package. Asus went with a 14-inch 1920 by 1200 OLED panel, and right out of the box, it looks fantastic. This isn't one of those overhyped OLEDs that only pop in marketing renders. The contrast is legitimately rich, blacks are true black, and colors have that punchy saturation that only OLED can really pull off. Whether you're scrolling through web pages or binging YouTube, it delivers a crisp, vibrant experience with plenty of depth. The 16:10 aspect ratio is a nice bonus. It gives you just that bit of extra vertical space that makes documents, websites, and even editing timelines feel less cramped. And for a machine that's built around productivity and mobility, that ratio makes a big difference in day-to-day use. Now, it's not all perfect. The lower resolution negates some of the benefits of this panel type. Some text renders fuzzily, and a tad difficult to read at normal viewing distances. In my experience, writing text in word processors was a much worse experience compared to my Pavilion 14 Plus with its 3K 120Hz OLED panel. And speaking of refresh rate, the refresh rate here is capped at 60 Hz, which in 2025 feels like a bit of a letdown, especially on a $1,200 machine. I get that Asus was probably trying to preserve battery life, and this thing does sip power, but when you're already making compromises with the CPU, a 90 Hz or even 120 Hz panel would have been a strong way to compensate. As it stands, motion is okay but not buttery, and there's no touchscreen, which might be a deal breaker for some. Brightness is good, but not MacBook killer bright. In indoor settings or coffee shops, you're golden, but direct sunlight, expect a lot of squinting unless you can crank it up to the max. And even then, reflections can get distracting due to the glossy finish. But again, it's OLED, so while not flagship tier, it's still leagues better than the washed out IPS panels found in most mid-range Windows laptops. Now let's talk speakers. they're actually quite decent. Volume is surprisingly strong. You won't have any trouble filling a small room for a Zoom call or a Netflix binge, and vocals come through clearly. But the bass is a tad soft. It's not tinny exactly, but it's sort of flat. It feels like the mid-range and higher tones were balanced more. It's not awful, quite the contrary actually. It's just not up to snuff if you're an audiophile or a MacBook owner. Though I imagine for the layman listener, they'll be just fine enough. You know, just get a nice pair of headphones. Okay, buckle up because the performance section for the ZenBook A14 is where things start getting strange. Let's start with Cinebench R24, a reliable CPU benchmark that has native support for ARM, which means we don't have to deal with the Prism translation layer for this one. I ran both the balanced and best performance power plans in Windows, and the results? Completely backwards from what you'd expect. Under the balanced plan, the ZenBook A14 scored 471 points in multi-core and 95 points in single-core. Pretty solid numbers for a cooled ARM chip in a featherweight chassis. But then I switched to the best performance plan and everything got worse. Multi-core plummeted to 356 points and single-core dropped to 58 points. That's not a rounding error. That's a full 24% drop in multi-core and a 39% drop in single core. And this is under the plan literally labeled best performance. So how can this be? Well, it's probably down to how Windows handles power and thermal budgets on ARM-based systems. The best performance power plan may be pushing clocks aggressively without accounting for the sustained thermal load causing early throttling. Meanwhile, the balanced plan likely manages clocks more conservatively, resulting in better thermal stability and, ironically, better scores. That's an issue, and not just for benchmarks, but for consistency. If you can't trust Windows' own power plan to deliver what they claim, how is a normal user supposed to get optimal performance? Now let's put those scores into context. I also tested the HP Pavilion 14 Plus powered by the Ryzen 7 7840U, and in Cinebench R24, it scored 628 points in multi-core and 95 points in single core under the same best performance power plan. So let's run the math. For multi-core, A14, 356 points, Pavilion 14 Plus, 628 points. That's a 43% performance deficit for the A14. Then for single core, for the A14, under the best plan, that's 58 points. Then the Pavilion 14, that's 95 points. Then that's a 39% deficit. Now, if we go by the balanced power plan instead, the one that actually performed better, the A14 pulls 471 multi-core, 95 single core. That brings the multi-core gap down to 25%, and it matches the Pavilion 14 Plus in single core. So paradoxically, the A14 actually catches up quite a bit when it's not on the plan labeled best. But that doesn't change the fact that you're getting wildly inconsistent results depending on how the OS decides to treat performance versus thermals. And here's the takeaway. It's not that the chip is bad. The Snapdragon X platform has some genuinely impressive efficiency figures. Qualcomm's own data shows that watt for watt, it outperforms Intel's Core 5 120U by up to 163% in multi-core performance per watt. But raw scores are still raw scores. And in this case, even at its best, the X1 lands firmly in the lower mid-range of modern laptop CPUs. And the keen-eyed among you probably noticed that I said nothing of the GPU. And that's because of the other elephant in the room. Windows on ARM is in a bad spot for gaming right now. There's so much to go over, but it's beyond the scope of this review. Though, if you'd like to see me do a dedicated gaming on Snapdragon video, then let's get this video to say 100 likes. At any rate, all I can say is that it's not looking good in its current state, but I have been told by a Qualcomm employee that they have big plans and announcements regarding the gaming experience this year. Who knows? We'll see what they say during their keynote at Computex, but for the here and now, this is just a use case beyond the platform's purview. Stick to tasks with native ARM versions, things that can be done in a browser, or apps that will emulate well through Prism. Anything beyond this and the chip will start sweating fast. I mean, absolute battery drain. Though the question is, how fast that battery will drain. Yeah, let's talk about battery life now. Alright, we've established that the ZenBook A14 isn't exactly a performance powerhouse, but when it comes to battery life, this thing is an absolute beast. Inside, you got a 70 watt-hour battery, which is already a decent size for a 14-inch Ultrabook, but when you combine that with Qualcomm's incredibly efficient X1 chip, I mean, this thing is in a league of its own. I tried that standard laptop reviewer test of looping an offline movie with airplane mode enabled and screen brightness locked at 250 nits, and this laptop clocked an astonishing 1,436 minutes. That's nearly 24 hours of battery life. Straight up, one full day, not all day like marketing fluff, a literal day of operation on a single charge. And no, that's not just synthetic benchmark magic. In actual real-world use, juggling web browsing, document work, YouTube, KiCad, and 110 Edge tabs, and also a few video calls, I regularly saw 16 to 18 hours of battery life. That's MacBook Air territory and then some. And you've also got amazing standby time as well. Close the lid at night with 100% charge, and when you wake up, you've only lost at most 1 to 3% of battery life when you open the lid. And that's something I'm not used to, and boy is it a strange feeling. The Orion cores just sit powered during idle and load tasks, and the chip doesn't seem to waste energy chasing max clocks it can't sustain. That, combined with intelligent platform level power gating, helps the A14 stay cool and efficient even when its dual fan active cooling system is quietly doing its thing in the background. And yes, you heard that right. I know most ARM chips now have active cooling, but I feel that the A14 does it in a very, very elegant manner. You have two fans, but they rarely ramp up to high-pitched levels, even when you're doing high-stress tasks, like benchmarking or sustained app installs. For everyday usage, it's whisper quiet. And that's because thankfully Asus engineers understand physics. A laptop with two fans can perform acoustically better than one with only a single fan. Making one fan spin faster and louder to dissipate heat is a poor measure when two fans can spin slower in sync to achieve the same effect. Chip temps hovered around 40 degrees Celsius, which means the heat that you could feel on the chassis itself was nearly non-existent. The palm rests remain very cool to the touch, with only the USB-C ports experiencing any sort of noticeable heat. They do get quite hot when you have things plugged into them, so make sure you be careful there. So after all of that, what exactly is the ZenBook A14? Well, it's a machine that's laser focused on a very specific kind of user. If you want cutting edge performance, if you're chasing the highest Cinebench scores, or if you're looking to edit 4K video on a flight, this ain't it, chief. And at $1,200, that makes for a tricky conversation. The Snapdragon X1 chip inside was designed for a $600 class of laptops, and that intent shows. It's efficient, quiet, and built for longevity, not power. Asus, meanwhile, took that chip and wrapped it in a gorgeous, ultralight chassis with a beautiful OLED display, great battery life, and premium build materials, and then slapped a high-end price tag on top. And that's the core tension with this device. It's a premium feeling laptop running on entry tier silicon. And for those reasons, I can't recommend this laptop at its retail price. I feel it's just a bit too much for the core technology inside. I'd say a machine like this is a no-brainer at around $1,000 or realistically on sale for about $950. Asus would capture insane amounts of market share with a laptop like this priced under $1,000. And let's keep things in perspective now. This is not a bad product, far from it. It's just not as competitively priced as it can be. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you and say that there's gonna be loads of other Windows laptops you can find for $1,200 that will match this one in terms of look, feel, and efficiency, because truthfully, you won't. I'm sorry. Asus knows that, and it's why they feel comfortable charging this much. So the question becomes, is this laptop worth it at its current price? Well, take it from my friend to whom I asked this very same question to. So you wouldn't pay $1,200 for this?
Something that I can't play like games and watch stuff. I mean, unless I knew that support was coming pretty soon.
I mean, you can watch movies on it. I mean, most stuff runs in a browser. Discord will work, stuff like that. But as far as like gaming, no, it's gonna be a mixed bag. So no, $1,200. No.
No, if I'm paying that kind of money, I kind of want to be able to do everything. Unless I knew support was coming real soon for it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. All right, scratch gaming. So you can't game on it, but would you still pay? No, what price would you pay for it? No gaming. Because I mean, it does have benefits, right? OLED screen. You're gonna have like.
Yeah, if I knew like all the specs, that would depend on how much I paid for it. You gave me no specs.
Think about, all right, so 8-core CPU, an okay anemic GPU. You get an OLED screen, 1200p resolution, and then almost 20 hours of battery life doing normal stuff.
That's something I would like gift somebody.
You wouldn't pay for it? You wouldn't pay for it? So you give it to somebody but you wouldn't pay for it?
I would pay for it, but I would use it. I would gift it to somebody.
Okay, so how much would you pay for it, right? So
how much would I pay for it?
It's my birthday, right? I want a laptop that lasts like all day, but I don't like Apple MacBooks. So how much did you pay for it?
That's a little question because I know your knowledge on computers. I just can't pick this up and tell you.
Okay. Somebody else.
Like, my brother would use it.
Oh, you would?
Well, like, I mean, he'll probably use it for like emulators or something. Probably not for like.
Ooh, that's the thing. Up to like N64 is pretty good.
That's probably, he plays GBA emulators, so he'd be.
Oh yeah, he'd be fine. Okay.
He's not emulating like PS4.
So I mean, how much? Okay, it's your brother's birthday. How much you gonna pay for it? If you can name your price right now with everything you know, right? Because you're not missing too much. How much you pay for it?
I'll drop it to 1K. 1K should be.
You drop it to 1K?
Yeah.
It's not bad. That's not bad. All right, man. Thank you for your time. Much appreciated. You heard it here, folks. Straight from a potential consumer's mouth. 1K is at most what he'd pay, and I'd sort of be inclined to agree. And that brings us to the other half of the equation. It's not just about price, but whether the software you rely on actually works. This laptop would be perfect for me if my video editor was supported. I use Movavi Video Editor 25, and it unfortunately does not support the ARM version of Windows. It'll run an emulation, but everything is done on the CPU. So no GPU acceleration means an awful time for on-the-go editing. Come the 16th of this month, I'll be leaving for Computex in Taiwan. I was really in need of a laptop that I could use to make videos while I'm away. There's a lot of timely content I need to cover, but this laptop just can't quite cut the mustard. It's got almost everything I need. Long battery life is so important when you're at a trade show. Something that can last a 22-hour flight, can take notes, stay up to date, collaborate with vendors, but without Adreno graphics support, you're gonna have a bad time in mid-sized software. The stuff that's not from Adobe, Microsoft, and other gigantic vendors. But despite those shortcomings, it's also a fascinating preview of where Windows on ARM is headed, because when things work, they work so well. There was this time at work recently where I decided to switch this laptop for a few days, and I went an entire 10-hour workday doing nothing but writing, bouncing from video call to video call, streaming music, and running several presentations. This was all on battery, and by the time the day had ended, the battery had only dropped from 100 to 88%. So yeah, I can see the vision Microsoft and Qualcomm are gunning for, but it's gonna take more than Copilot marketing, stagnant Prism updates, and pricey designs from OEMs. Qualcomm, you are the disruptor in this new paradigm. It's up to you to convince other companies to adopt your new radical architecture. You should be giving away Snapdragon laptops and throwing money at companies who port their software over. There needs to be a concerted effort to push the adoption of this technology. Please, please, please don't repeat the same mistakes of yesteryear where we got ARM laptops from you, but so little work was done to get the adoption going that the initiative died before even really starting. But I digress. As it stands, the A14 is a niche but incredibly polished device. It's a flex on battery endurance and mobility, but just not for speed or price performance. And you know, that's fine, as long as you know what you're signing up for. Just like I'm a niche but incredibly polished creator, and if that sounds like your thing, well hey, maybe I'm worth subscribing to. I'm the Silicon Foxx, saying good night YouTube. I will be here all week.